I'm Laura Bryant from the Merowitz Center, and we're here today to welcome Jessica Merowitz back to discuss podcasts. So, hello. Jessica has more than 12 years of experience working in the marketing and advertising industry for locally based companies, including Scottrade and Nestle Purina. She currently helps pet brands like Purina, Pro Plan, Dog Chow, Tidy Cat, and Frisky develop targeting strategies using data. And this allows advertising campaigns to reach the right consumers as they're browsing the web, streaming content, or scrolling through social media like Facebook. Jessica is an executive board member at Covenant Play and enjoys sharing her marketing knowledge and being a resource to the Merowitz Center and Tech Tutor community. So we're ready to hand this off to Jessica, and thank you again for making your time to help everybody out with this very intriguing topic today.
Thanks, Laura. Thanks, everyone. Great to be back here today to talk to you about podcasts. We'll dive in. So today we'll be talking about what is a podcast. I'll go through kind of the definition, how to think about podcasts and who's listening to podcasts today. I'll also talk through the different types of podcasts. There's a lot of them out there. How do you pick which one you might want to tune into? So I'll give you some tips for that. I'll also talk through how you can tune in and listen to podcasts, and we'll give you a couple of kind of how-tos and more technical tips that hopefully you'll find to be helpful. I also have a couple of fun trivia questions sprinkled in throughout, so we'll kind of take some time to pause, and you can engage in the chat, or you can unmute and kind of chime in with your answers. And please feel free to ask questions along the way. Hopefully this is helpful and informative for you all, and fun. Okay, so let's begin. What is a podcast? So the literal definition of a podcast is that it's a collection or series of digital audio files available for listening over the internet. Each audio recording is known as a podcast episode, and it's created by a person called a podcaster. So really anyone could be a podcaster if they wanted to by recording an episode and finding a platform to post it on. Episodes are released on a regular cadence, so typically daily, weekly, monthly. So people find podcasts that they like and they tune in and they look out for those podcasts when they expect them to be released. The word podcast actually is derived from a combination of the word iPad and the word broadcast. So iPod. When iPods were invented, it was, a music device you could use to listen to music. But then audio recordings were thought of more as broadcast. So the term was invented to kind of combine those two words. So it is kind of a newer phenomenon, but it is similar to kind of tuning into a radio station, except that you can listen at any time. You don't have to tune in at a certain time. You can listen to it at your own leisure because they are released, and then you can, again, tune in whenever you would like. And I'll explain how to do that later on. So who listens to podcasts? Podcast listening rates are actually growing each year, especially among older age groups. This data was actually pulled in 2020 from a study that looked at podcast listening by age group. And you can see that younger generations are listening to podcasts at an extremely high rate. Almost 90% of people of the ages 12 to 34 listen to podcasts each week. And that number is still even really high among, age groups 35 to 54. Ages 55 plus, around 42% reported listening to podcasts. But this study that I was referencing was done in the year 2020. So a lot has changed since then in our media habits and behaviors. And I would say that number's probably increased since then with the number of people discovering and tuning into podcasts. Just because we're home more, we're doing more things maybe by ourselves, or going on a lot more walks than maybe we used to. So yeah, that number's increased definitely since then. So, oh, there we go. So why should I consider listening to podcasts? People listen to learn new things, to be entertained, to stay up to date on some of the latest topics, to relax, or to feel inspired. Personally, I listen to podcasts because I find them to be relaxing. I'll tune in from the car when I'm driving to and from work. It's kind of like a reset to kind of clear my mind and to just think about something else. I also like listening to podcasts to learn new things and just to kind of expand my mindset about a certain topic. Things to do while listening to a podcast. So you could listen while going for a walk, cooking, doing laundry, driving, cleaning, or even traveling. The thing about podcasts is that you can multitask while you're doing it. You can do something else and also be tuning into a podcast at the same time. I do find that it's difficult to listen to a podcast while you're having to maybe type an email or use your brain in a certain way, like maybe doing work. But it's great for things that are a little bit more mindless, like, again, exercising or preparing dinner. Okay, so a little bit of trivia for you guys. What do you think is the most common place where people in the US listen to podcasts? You can go ahead and shout out your answer or type it into the chat. What do you think? Is it in the car, at the gym, around the house, while at work, or on a walk? See a couple in the chat. Anyone else want to call out what they think it might be? Okay. The answer is C, around the house. According to the study, I found around 90% of people reported just listening to podcasts around the house. So I think this is interesting because it doesn't have to be a complicated thing. You don't have to, hook it up to your car or anything complex like that. It's something you could literally do while you were sitting in your house. And I'll show you ways that you can do that. What do you guys think? Well, really quick, the second most common place is to listen to a podcast. Any guesses? So I see a couple coming through. The second most common place people listen to podcasts is in the car. So I mentioned that I am one of those people that listens to podcasts in the car. Many other people do as well. That you have to, hook up your phone to the car's Bluetooth. So it's a little bit more complex, but that is also very common. A lot of people do that. Okay, moving on. Oh, we have more trivia. How many podcasts do you think are out there? Guess A, B, C, or D. Any guess is a good guess. Got a couple coming in. Okay. If you guessed D, then you are correct. There are almost 2 million podcasts out there, which is crazy. That is a lot. And there are more popping up each day. That might seem really overwhelming, but don't be overwhelmed. There are a couple really good ones that you can tune into and follow, which I'll help you figure out how to do that. So one last trivia question. Actually, this is the second to last. What do you think is the average number of podcasts that people listen to each week? A, B, C, or D? A couple more coming in. The answer is A, 6. So I think this is really interesting. There are almost 2 million podcasts out there, but on average, most people only tune into around 6 podcasts each week. So again, it doesn't have to be super overwhelming. It's really about finding what you like, a little bit of trial and error. And then, once you find those set podcasts that you really like, you're going to want to start tuning into them each week and following along. I definitely do this. I will, subscribe to a whole bunch of podcasts. I might, hear of a new one. I'll check it out. If I like it, then I'll keep listening to it. And if I don't like it, then it'll kind of drop off my radar. And on average, I think I fall in that 6 range as far as average number of podcasts that I'm tuning into each week. Okay, so how do you go about choosing a podcast to listen to? So there are a lot of different types of podcasts. Rolled up at the highest level, there are news podcasts, pop culture, comedy, sports, lifestyle, politics, religion, investigative, self-help, and true crime. So you could start by, picking a topic that interests you and then searching for the top podcasts within that specific topic. Podcasts have different formats. So many of them will be perhaps an interview with someone or conversational, maybe a conversation between 2 or 3 people talking about a specific topic. Or they could be a monologue, just one person kind of going on about a topic that maybe they're an expert on. Storytelling is a really popular format of podcasts where people might bring in, audio files or sound effects or things to kind of make the recording a bit more interesting and colorful. Or something could be repurposed into a podcast, such as a live interview at an event or a musical or a concert that took place. Could be recorded and then repurposed into a podcast that you could tune into later. Okay, so one last trivia question. What do you all think is the most popular type of podcast, according to a study that I found for US podcast listeners? Which topic do you think is most listened to? See a couple of guesses coming in. Does anyone else want to unmute and guess which topic they think is the most popular? If not, that's okay. So the answer is actually comedy, which kind of surprised me when I saw that. Made me think, oh, I need to go find some comedy podcasts to tune into. The second most popular was a tie between news and true crime. True crime is a really popular type of podcast that people really like tuning into. There's a lot of true crime podcasts out there. It's not really my cup of tea, but it might be yours. And there are some popular ones you could check out. So again, how do I find the right podcast for me? A lot of times I think friend and family recommendations are a really great way to find new podcasts. If there is a person out there that you look up to, whether it's a celebrity or a public figure, I guarantee you they probably have a podcast. A lot of famous people are now going down the route of creating their own podcasts. So if there's, again, someone that you really like, that you would like to hear from, yeah, odds are they probably have a podcast that you could tune into. Most news publications have podcasts or even podcast networks. So if there's a news publication that you trust and that you really like, you could probably find some podcasts there. I saw that the AARP has a list of podcast recs, which I will share with you on the next slide. There's also podcast networks. So kind of like how there are television networks like CBS or Fox. Now there are podcast networks where, a company or a conglomerate will essentially buy the rights to a podcast and sell ads, and will kind of create a collection or library, if you will, of podcasts. So you can seek out podcasts that way by browsing through networks. So I thought it would be kind of cool to give you guys some podcast recommendations from me and a couple other sources as well. So for news, there are a couple of podcasts that I think are great that I tune into, specifically the New York Times, The Daily, NPR's Up First, Time, The Brief, and Vox Today Explained. These all go more like really in depth on specific topics. So you're just getting, a lot more information, a lot more perspective sometimes when you can listen to a podcast episode about a specific issue or thing going on in the world. The AARP, these are the podcasts that I saw that they recommended, and I checked some of them out and thought that they were really great. The 70 over 70 was an interview series that someone did where they interviewed 70 people, and they completed it. It's done, but you can kind of tune in and see, listen to some of those interviews with fascinating people. And I thought that was pretty cool. There's another one called Make Me Smart, where two individuals dive into different topics. And then A Life Story and Zestful Aging were a couple other ones that they had recommended checking out. A couple other really popular ones that I've listened to, Fresh Air with Terry Gross. It's an NPR podcast. So is Planet Money. How I Built This with Guy Raz is a great one. It's all interviewing founders of businesses that have made it, and kind of they're hearing their beginnings stories. Unlocking Us with Brene Brown is also a really popular one. She's kind of a self-help guru that a lot of people like, and she has a very soothing voice. So I will share this with you as a handout if you ever want to revisit and check out some of these podcasts. A couple other podcast recs for me personally. And again, I'll send these to you. These are more in the realm of storytelling, which I've really gotten into lately. I just think it really grabs you in. These podcasters do such a good job at using sound effects and interviewing people and diving into these stories that, again, just really hook you. The Dolly Parton's America one was a great one, where it was an interviewer shared his personal connection, but also interviewed Dolly Parton and got really in depth on her life, which I thought was really cool. One of my favorite podcasts of all time, which I've starred, was by this podcast called Reply All, and it was called The Case of the Missing Hit. I highly recommend checking it out. It was an insane story. It was kind of an investigative podcast, which has a really cool ending. So that's one that I definitely recommend. I just finished listening to American Radical, which was a little sad, but it was about an in-depth story of someone who was impacted by January 6th. This American Life you've probably heard of. They do really great storytelling. Heavyweight's another one where this guy does a lot of great interviews and tells people's stories in depth. Even the Rich is kind of a fun pop culture storytelling podcast where they talk about people who are very wealthy and have rich people problems, and they kind of go into different funny stories about that. And then last, a really popular podcast by Malcolm Gladwell is called Revisionist History. Again, great storytelling. So you guys could check some of these out if you are interested. Okay, so the next section is around how to listen to a podcast. What do you need? What's the tech? So there are two ways that you can go about listening to a podcast. The way I'll talk through right now is via your mobile device. So what you'll need to listen on your mobile device is, well, first of all, a mobile device, a smart mobile device. So an iPhone, an iPad, or an Android. You'll also need a Wi-Fi connection. You'll need to download a podcast app. Two that I would recommend are Spotify or Apple Podcasts. You'll also need some sort of way to listen, whether it's headphones or a smart speaker, or if you're just at home, you can just listen through your phone speaker as long as you're not bothering anyone around you. You can also listen to a podcast simply from your desktop computer. You don't need all the fancy hookups or anything like that. Here's how you would go about doing that. You can go to Google Podcasts, www.podcast.google.com, and you can literally look up pretty much any podcast there. You can browse, and then you can listen directly from your computer. No tech really needed besides your computer and an internet connection. So that's one pretty simple way to start diving in. If you can't find what you're looking for that way, you can also search for a specific podcast within your web browser. So you can go into Google and search, say, for This American Life. And you'll see that This American Life actually has their own website. And you can go to their specific website and browse through all of their content. And you can listen directly from their site by clicking play. So it's, again, another pretty simple way to do it when you're just sitting on your computer. So I have a couple more how-tos and tips, but I will pause and see if there are any questions. I don't know if there's anything in the chat. Does anyone have any questions before I jump into the next section?
Let's see. Let's see. Okay. Yes. Okay.
Hi.
All right. I have interest in two unusual ones. I happen to be Jewish, but I'm very ecumenical. So I have Joel Osteen. And I have Christian Science. I think it's that Christian Science. They have a lot of speakers on different topics.
Mm-hmm.
Podcast. So if I do it on the computer,
mm-hmm.
And I have the computer and I have Android.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Would you tell me, not very sophisticated with it technically, but how would you do those? Some people listen to Joel every day.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So how would I do him?
Yep. So you could either download a podcast app on your Android phone, a podcast listening app. Google probably has one, actually. You could search in your app store for Google Podcasts. And you could, if it's something that you want to tune into every day, you can subscribe to his podcast in the app so that when you open the app on your phone, that would be the first thing that you see. You would see the latest podcast from that person or that network. You could also do it on your computer. That might be the easier way for now. You can kind of, like I talked about before, Google his name and podcast, and I would guess that he probably has a site where you can pretty easily and quickly tune into his podcast and even scroll through and see all of his previous ones and pick and choose which episodes you might be interested and want to listen to.
Okay. That's good. And then the same thing with Christian Science. When they have a name for the speakers. I forgot the name now. But lecture,
yeah, I would have to.
I'm sorry, lecture. That's what it is.
Oh, they have lectures.
Yeah.
You would have to see if they put those in a podcast format or not. I don't know if they have a network. Yeah. A lot of organizations, whether it be a religious organization or a news organization, will have almost their own podcast network, where you could literally look that up on the internet and search through the different podcasts, whether it be specific people or episodes that they have released. So you could do that. Again, I would recommend starting out by Googling it. So just opening up your web browser and looking up what the name is of that podcast. And then once you know what that specific podcast is called, you can either listen directly on your computer or you can subscribe to it on a podcast app on your phone. Okay. But the first step is getting that podcast app, figuring out the name of the podcast so that you know exactly what you're searching for, and then subscribing so that you don't have to keep seeking it out. Every time you open your phone and open up that podcast app, the episodes and the podcasts that you have subscribed to, the latest will show up on your phone when you open it up.
Well, when you say you buy from Google Store, how do you buy from them?
Nope, you don't have to buy anything. I meant the App Store. So you would download a podcast app from an app store.
I mean, you don't talk to them. Do you write it? How would you write it? In the search engine or something?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Type it into the search engine.
And you say the person's name, like Joel Osteen.
Mm-hmm. Joel Osteen podcast. I would start by Googling that. Yep.
Thanks.
Absolutely. Much. So I will, I'll move on to the next section and then we can open it up for more questions. So when I talk about having a podcast app on your smartphone, most podcast apps have a very similar interface. So these different actions are things that you will commonly see on a podcast app. So I'll go through each one, talk about what each kind of button can do, so that when you open up a podcast app, you'll kind of know what these different buttons mean. So at its simplest form, you can press the play button to play it, or you can pause it, which it'll be 2 dashes to pause it. So you can play, pause, whenever you need to do that. Another cool feature is that you can skip ahead. So this little button here means you can skip ahead 30 seconds, which I like to do. A lot of podcasts play ads throughout. That's how they make money. So oftentimes I'll kind of press this little button twice and then it'll skip ahead 1 minute. And then if I hear another ad, I'll press it again twice and it'll skip ahead another minute and then it'll get back to my programming that I'm listening to. So I really like that feature in those apps. You can also go back. So this is kind of a go back 15 seconds button. So if you heard something and you want to hear it again, you can click that little button and it will take you back 15 seconds. So that's a nice feature on those apps. You can also adjust the volume by kind of scrolling this dot left or right. Another cool feature on podcast apps is that you can slow it down, or speed it up. So this little button in the bottom left corner, it says 1x. Right now it is at the normal speed that the person is talking, but if I click this again, it will speed it up and the person will be talking faster. So some people like to do this if they are used to hearing people talk fast and they're trying to get through something really quick to kind of cut time. Or you can also, on the flip side, slow it down if you want to hear, take it in a bit more, and if that's something of interest to you. So you can just kind of keep pressing that button and it'll speed it up, and then it'll slow it down when you see kind of a negative number after that. So that's a cool feature. And then this one right here, this symbol means that you can connect to a speaker or a Bluetooth device. So that's a button you would press to essentially be able to listen to that podcast on your headphones or a smart speaker in your home or your car. So those are some cool features in a podcast app that I really like. And then a couple more just to kind of finish up. If you press those three little dots in the bottom right corner, it will open up a few other options in your podcast app. And I'll talk through what some of those are. So something you might want to do, I do this a lot. I'll listen to a podcast episode and I think, oh my gosh, that was so good. I need to share this with my friend who would really, really like this. So you can click this share button and then it'll allow you to text or email the link to that podcast to a friend through your phone. So I think that's a really cool feature. Another thing that you can do is you can download that episode to your phone. So that will enable you to listen to it when you're not connected to a Wi-Fi connection. Say you are going on an airplane and you're not going to have access to cellular data or Wi-Fi. Downloading a couple things, kind of like downloading videos to watch on your phone. You can also download podcasts and listen to them on your phone when you are, again, not connected to the internet. So when you're not able to stream, this is a good option to do. You can also remove the download to save up some room in your phone. Another thing that you may want to do, say you found a new podcast you really like, and you want to go back and hear some older episodes of this podcast. You can click on the Go to Show button that I have circled, and that will take you to the show's kind of page within your app, and you can kind of scroll through and find older episodes. You could also press the Play Next or Play Last button, and that will play additional episodes of that podcast. You could also save an episode, say it's something you want to come back to and revisit or listen to again. This will essentially bookmark it for you so that you can easily find it again when you open up your podcast app. And again, this is all on your phone. This is not necessarily something you can do on your desktop computer. These are all things that you would need a mobile device and a podcast app to do. And that brings me to the end of my class. I hope that you guys enjoyed and learned a thing or two. I'm definitely going to share the handouts with you so you can look up different podcasts, start browsing. And I'm also here for questions, and we have plenty of time. So if anyone has any questions, would love to hear it. Looking at the chat right now, I see how to pull up a podcast. Hopefully I helped answer that. But if you have further questions on that, I'm more than happy to walk through it again. And I see Jacob asked, what's your favorite comedy podcast? I actually tune into a podcast called Office Ladies. I don't know if any of you have ever heard of the TV show The Office, but two of the actors from that show started a podcast where they recap episodes and talk about behind the scenes funny stories from that show. So that's a whole other category of podcasts. People who are really into certain TV shows will literally create podcasts about those TV shows. So if you have a show that you like, a movie that you like, really anything that you like, there's probably a podcast about it somewhere. So that's another good way to find something that you might be interested in. I see a question. Can I also get a podcast on my smartphone? Yes. So by downloading a podcast app, then you can access podcasts on your smartphone. The podcast app that I use is Apple Podcasts. So I have an iPhone. I have Apple Podcasts. It's a app on my phone. I pull it up, and that's how I start to subscribe and search for different podcasts and follow along each week. And anytime I subscribe to a new podcast, then it will make sure that I'm notified when a new one has been released. And that's a great way for me to tune in over my phone. Android, so you can use Spotify is another popular app that you can search for pretty much any podcast, but Spotify is also a music streaming platform. So you can literally search for any song that you would want to hear. But in addition to songs and music, they also have podcasts. There's another popular app called Stitcher. And again, I can send this information out. And then I think Google might even have their own podcast app, which you could probably download to an Android device. And again, similar to Apple Podcasts, you would just use the Google Podcast on an Android to find, search for, subscribe to podcasts, and then be able to listen on your phone or tablet. Great questions. Any other questions? I'm curious what podcasts you guys are going to go seek out or listen to, or what kind of topics interest you. I know Lois shared what her interests are, but are there any other topics that you all are interested in that you might want to seek out a podcast for? And I could even kind of, if I can think of anything off the top of my head, share some recs with you or give you tips on maybe where to go to start finding some. Thank you. You can always reach out. Feel free to reach out to Laura, and she can share any questions, any additional questions you might have. She'll share with me, and I'll share the handout with you all. And I really, really appreciate your time. And it was great to be in front of you again. Thank you, guys.
Jessica, you did do a wonderful job. This is really interesting and timely. And I know there's just so many different directions people can go with podcasts. So thank you for helping to give people a little bit of direction and structure.
Happy to. Thank you.
Okay, everyone. Thank you very much.